and working with these fellows certainly is great. Unfortunately, that step from prison to the real world, either in IFI or for what you guys are doing, damn, that's tough.
I might tell this story today if I have time, but we had a live pitch event last year at the Bush Center on the SMU campus. Had 250 impact investors in the room. They were pitching for $250,000 in growth capital. Our winner was a guy who got out about 10 years ago. He got out, no skills whatsoever, went to work in the oil fields as labor. His boss's truck broke down one day, and his boss said, "Hey, will you see if you can fix the truck?" He goes, "Man, I am so not a mechanic." But he dove in and he fixed it, and his boss saw mechanical aptitude, so he began sending him to get training. Pretty soon they moved him into the mechanic shop. He rose to foreman, and that's when 6 years down the road, the entrepreneur came out in him. He started seeing gaps in what was going on.
Good afternoon, everybody. Everybody with me? We're going to start this today. My name is John Crabb, and I have been coming actually to these luncheons for I don't know how many years, and I remember the first one I came to, there were about 14 guys in a side room at the Houston Country Club. So what this organization has become in the last several years is pretty amazing. And first off, I just want to thank Tom and his team for continuing to raise the bar of the Toolbox. And I don't think you get enough praise and recognition for all you do. So thank you. And I think next I'm supposed to give a little testimony. I'll keep it very, very short. I am married. I have 2 great kids, 27 and 30, and they luckily live in Houston and are very close. And actually, it's married for about 5 months, my second marriage, so I'm actually a newlywed. I still can't believe it, but I'm very, very blessed to have a beautiful new wife. I grew up in Birmingham, Michigan, and I grew up really with no faith or religion. My father was a Catholic growing up, but really non-practicing, and my mother was clearly an atheist. So there was never talk of religion or faith or anything in my family, and it was something I was missing. I came to Houston in '82, fast forward, and I knew it's something I wanted to get involved in, but I didn't know how to do it. And being a single guy, my upstairs neighbors wanted to introduce me to this gal, and they did, and our first date was we were washing cars. And she played this song very loudly in her car by Amy Grant, a very renowned Christian artist. And the song took me, the words took me, and she was a strong Christian, and that's really how I started my whole Christian walk. And I've been involved in a lot of Bible studies and been mentored, and it has really, truly made a difference in my life. I think the one quick story is I was in a Bible study with Jim Nutter, who was a pastor at Palmer Episcopal. And very, very deep Bible study. We got very personal, and we really took verses and related them to what was going on in our lives. And I came to him when my first wife asked me for a divorce of 22 years, and I was devastated. And I went to Jim and talked to him, and he said, "You want me to, announce it at the Bible study so we can all pray?" And I said, "I don't think so. I think I'll just break down." So he said, "Fine." So anyway, he announced that there was a guy here, didn't want to be recognized, but if there was someone to support him, not necessarily just today, but throughout, please, see me after. And anyway, he raised his hand, and I met with him very, very briefly, and his name is Len. He's sitting right there. And he called me for 6 months every day, and just to check in. And some days I couldn't get out of bed. Some days I didn't want to answer the phone, and 2 times he came to my house and knocked on my door. So I guess one of the big parts in my walk is my community, and the men that I aspire to, the Christian men that have led me to my walk. And I like to think I'm more about significance than success. But I've been very philanthropic, and that will lead me to introducing Bryan. One of the most inspiring things I do is to attend prison. I go every month and sometimes twice a month, and meeting these guys and giving them hope and giving them a second chance and seeing how smart and brilliant and fun they are is I don't know, it's hard to describe. It's an experience. You have to be there. So that program is called the Prison Entrepreneurship Program. I met Bryan, of course, in prison, and he was just an incoming CEO to the program. And I took it my part to meet him and get to know him, and I've gotten to know him really well. And we speak all the time. In fact, I play Words with Friends with him, and he beats me every doggone time. I think you beat me once, and I think you let me win. But there are words that I thought of to describe who Bryan is, and I wanted to read these so I didn't forget them. Catalytic, he's caring, he's loving, he's insightful, he's a very impactful speaker, he has a great sense of humor, he is a leader in every respect and has taken PEP to the next level and setting a new bar, but he leads by example. He is a true communicator, he's disruptive, but in a very positive sense, and he was probably one of the most inspiring guys I've ever met. So it's an honor and a privilege to introduce my very, very good friend and Christian brother, Bryan Kelley. You're the man.
Golly, bro. Thank you.
I love you, bro.
I love you too. Wow, I didn't know I was going to start out teary-eyed. God, it's an honor to be here today. And I know everybody gets up here and says that, but I really mean it. I mean, I came to this Toolbox, I don't know, a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago for the first time. I came with Bert, totally intimidated by you guys, scared to sit at the table, thinking, oh my gosh, I'm sitting here amongst greatness. What do I have to say? I just need to shut up and be quiet. And what I found out is you guys don't bite, except when I try to grab your pork chop. And I learned not to do that. But you know, it reminded me of a scripture. Do you see a man skillful in his work? He will stand before kings and not before obscure men. Today I stand before kings. And I know that you guys are difference makers. You're world changers. You're disruptors. And it is an honor to be in your midst. Now, I'll tell you, a year and a half ago, when I started coming to Toolbox and getting inspired by it, never once in my wildest dreams did I ever think I would be attending one day up here from the lectern and speaking to the microphone. So it is an honor to be here. Thank you. I want to share a little bit about my story, which is not really my story, it's God's story. And he constantly amazes me in how he works in my life and the lives all around me. And so I want to start out and ask you if any of you have ever heard these words or phrases. Man up. Be a man. How about this one? Man the F up. Don't be a broad. You're acting like a girl. Real men don't cry. I've heard all of those in my life. Usually from people that I'm looking to for guidance or my peers or my friend groups. I mean, as men, we are outrageously hard on each other in our banter at times, not always edifying and lifting up. I heard all those things from the people around me, and it's quite frankly, it's discouraging. Right? And sometimes we internalize those things. And it made me think, you know, what is it? What is a man? What's it mean to be a man? Is it simply because we have a penis? We're sperm producers? Or in today's time, does it mean I made the choice to be a man? Yeah. Right? Does it mean that I've got more muscle mass? That I'm stronger, that I can lift up more, that I can fight, that I can go to war, that I can kill? Does it mean that I like to fix things? I intuitively want to jump into that. I love to hang out at Lowe's. Does it mean that when I'm driving 75 miles an hour down the road that I can see a rabbit in the ditch, a squirrel in a tree, a hog over in the woods, and a buck lying in the tall grass at 300 yards, but I can't find my socks that match in the drawer? Or I like this one too. Does it mean that I am really good at backing my truck into a parking stall? There was a young lady that worked with us a few years ago, and we were going to make a presentation. I was driving, and I backed into the parking space, and she goes, "Oh, why do men always back into their parking space?" And I go, "Oh, you don't know?" She goes, "No, why is that?" And I go, "It's because we can." Now, I would discourage you from that response. It doesn't go well, and it probably won't go well. But you know what? It's made me really think about, what does it mean to be a man? And you know, what do I know? My father abandoned me when I was a toddler. I've never known him. He never came back. He never came back into our lives. My mom never remarried, so there was no men around me to really invest in me and show me what it was like to be a man. Now, there were men in my family, and they were largely alcoholic construction workers, so I got to see them from afar, what it means to be a man. And I also took it from my culture and from the world around me and TV. And so, you know what I found out that it means to be a man? What I saw was men work hard, they drink hard, they treat their women hard. Men are hard. I found out that it means they're aloof, they lie, they cuss, they spit, they fight, they fart, they hunt, they kill. Most of all, the thing that I noticed is men demand respect, right? And so those are the things that I garnered from the men that were around me and from my culture. And so I gravitated to that. I'm like, if that's what it means to be a man, that's what I want to be. So what did I do? Well, at 12, I started drinking. At 13, I started smoking weed. At 14, I really started pushing the iron and getting strong, and I became kind of the alpha athlete in my school. I would end up winning state in the discus, third in the javelin, placed in the shot put, and I was always the strongest one in my school. And so, you know, I dove into that part of being a man. At 15, I got into hard drugs. I bought a four-wheel drive because I thought that was manly. At 16, I was dating the head cheerleader, and we got pregnant. At 16, I also found out what it's like to be a part of an abortion. I gravitated to all the things that I thought were being a man. And I used to love to prove that I was a man. There was no dare that I wouldn't accept. I can't tell you how many stupid things I did that were preceded by, y'all watch this or hold my beer. But I was always trying to prove that I was a man. What I found out is I was not a man at all. I was a perverse caricature of a man. I was selfish, insecure, although I desperately didn't want you to know that. I was aloof, I was unemotional, I was mean, I was mouthy, I fought a lot. I even boxed in Dallas for a while because I thought it was manly. It wasn't because I was a good boxer. I got my rear end handed to me every time I did that. I became an alcoholic, an addict. I was a womanizer. And many times I'm sharing my testimony, I share that back then I was a desperado out riding fences in love with a monster called Moore. I was a mess. And you know what? I spiraled downward, loving all the wrong things, going to all the wrong altars, until one day, in 1992, I was standing in a courtroom in Dallas, everybody looking at me with hatred and scorn and condemnation, and I could feel it. And the judge looked at me over his glasses and he said, "Mr. Kelley, a jury of your peers has found you guilty of the crime of murder and has sentenced you to life in a state penitentiary. Now, do you have anything to say for yourself?" as I stood there trembling, I expected him to cap that with, boy, because that's exactly what I was. I wasn't a man. I probably wasn't even a boy. I was this perverse caricature who didn't know how to live life, who was in love with all the wrong things. And I needed to be taken off the street. I needed to be put in timeout because I was reckless and I was causing harm to those around me. I was creating destruction. And you know, it's funny, I was remanded to the prison. I went to one of the largest ones in Texas in Palestine, the Bedo unit. Almost 4,000 inmates. Demographic was 18 to 21. At 26, they called me old school, and they fought over everything. What I recognized is that whole palace worshiped manhood the same way I did. They demanded respect. You know, in prison, you draw a hard line and you fight for yours, and if you don't, you're in trouble. And it was interesting, my first day in the day room in prison, I was kind of I was schooled by a guy who went to prison a few times, and he told me what it was going to be like. And he said, when you go to the day room, you go put your stuff in your cell, and you come back down to the day room, and you go to the back of the day room and get ready. The first person who comes and approaches you, man, you just light into them. You have got to earn your respect. They call it earning your bones, right? And he said, you go back there and you just start fighting for all you've got. And he said, if you do that, some guys will come to your rescue. If you don't, you've got a life sentence. Your time in prison will be terrible. And so I'm like, oh my God, okay, I get it, I hear you. So my first day, man, I went there and I went and put my stuff in the house, and I dropped down, I did a few push-ups, and I went down to the day room, and I went to the back, and I was amped up, and I was looking around at the people in the day room. There's about 75 guys in there playing dominoes and watching TV, and everybody's ignoring me. And I'm back there, and I'm just huffing and puffing. I'm looking around like, who's it going to be? And everybody ignored me. After about 10 minutes, I'm going, okay, I don't know how to handle this. And so finally, I kind of milled over, and I started watching some guys playing dominoes. And this young, stocky black guy comes up to me, and he said, look out, Peckerwood. And I went, what? And he said, oh, easy, man. I see you're going to stay down. I didn't know what any of that meant. And I thought when he said, I see you're going to stay down, I thought it meant that, man, if I get hit and I go down, I'm not going to get back up. And I'm like, man, I am not going to stay down. And I balled up my fist, and he smiled, and he said, well, relax. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. What I didn't realize is that guy was paying me tremendous respect. I just didn't know the lingo. I didn't know the jargon. And so we laughed about it later. When he came up and he said, hey, Peckerwood, they recognize who will fight. And everybody in prison is very attuned to who will fight for their own. And Peckerwood is a term for white guys in prison who will fight for their own. Sometimes it's shortened down to wood. And when he was saying that, it was a term of respect. When he said I was going to stay down, it meant I would fight for my own. He was already giving me respect. I didn't even know it. And so it's just a different climate in prison, different culture, but it's based on the same things that I had based my object of manhood on. And I'll tell you, a few months later, there was a riot on the rec yard that I was a part of, didn't even know why. It was 75 guys on 21 of us. And I fought, and I didn't even know why, but you fought to live. After that, we all got put on lockdown for about 30 days, and 3 or 4 days into it, I was standing at the front of my cell. It was twilight, and you could hear kind of the collaborative din up and down in prison as everybody's talking in their cells, either to their cellie or to somebody up and down the run. And I was just bored, and I was standing there at the bars thinking, what have I got myself into? And about that time upstairs somewhere, I could hear the telltale signs of scuffle, sneakers squeaking on the concrete, and then a thud, and I heard a guy say, no, I'm a man too. More squeaking, more thuds. No, I'm a man too. And I was sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, this guy's lockdown is way worse than mine. But even in prison, you were desperately fighting for that caricature of manhood. Totally missing the mark. You know, I stayed kind of in that umbrella for about a year, maybe a year and a half, and I was invited to a prison ministry called Kairos, which is a Greek term for God's special time. It's kind of like a celebration or a birthday or an appointed time. And my friend that invited me said, hey, why don't you come to the chapel to go to Kairos? And I'm like, what's that? And he said, dude, it's 4 days of home-cooked meals. And I said, well, sign me up because this food is horrible. And so I went to get fed. And I got fed so much more than I bargained for. You know, I went in there, and Kairos, if you don't know, is 42 multi-denominational men who come in to impact 42 hand-selected inmates over a 4-day period. We sit down in small groups, and we have talks about things like forgiveness, and we process that, and we talk about our depravity wound and our father wounds sometimes, and we process that, and it's hugely emotional, it's transformative. But I'll tell you, I had never been around men like that before. I thought they weren't real. I was poking and prodding and asking questions and saying, where do men like you come from? You are loving, you're accepting, you're kind, you're quiet and calm and peaceful and joyful. I've never seen that. And I really bonded with a Lutheran preacher. And for a couple of days, we just talked about life stuff, and he won my confidence. To that point, I had never admitted to anybody that I was guilty of my crime. I had lied at court. I had lied to my family, my friends. I was even lying to the other prisoners. And I couldn't carry it. Being around men of light like that, carrying that darkness, I couldn't carry it anymore. And so I grabbed this guy by the arm, and I said, I need to tell you something. He said, okay. So we went off to the side, and we sat down, and I just began to blubber. And I told him everything about my crime, all the details, and he listened patiently. And finally he looked at me and he said, Bryan, I am so honored that you would share that with me first. That's huge, and I get it. I want you to hear something. I forgive you. Guys, I fell apart. I was a snotty, hitching mess. I didn't think I would ever hear those words from anybody. So he let me regain composure, and he said, Bryan, man, even though I forgive you, and that's true, you need to ask God to forgive you, and I promise you he will. And I said, yeah, Keith, I know, I get that, but I can't. And he said, why not? And I said, well, I know I don't deserve it. And he looked at me and he smiled, he even laughed, and he said, I didn't realize when I came here this weekend I was going to meet somebody smarter than God. And I said, hold up, I didn't say that. He said, sure you did. You said God would forgive you if you ask him, but of course you know how to handle this better than he does. Guess what? You don't. And you're never going to have joy, peace, purpose, love, hope in your life until you let go of this and give it to him. He knows it anyway. Why are you holding it back? Just admit it to him. And he really just dismantled my whole argument. But I'll tell you, I was looking at my life thinking, my very best thinking led to a life sentence for murder, devastated families. What the heck do I know about living? What do I know about being a man? Nothing. Zero. So I was willing to turn that over. So we got down on my knees that day, May 28, 1994. And I handed it over. I gave God my broken pieces. I said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I've made such a shamble of things. And it's amazing what God can do with broken pieces. He'll make a masterpiece. And so, it didn't get me out of the consequences of my crime. I would still end up doing over 20 years after that. But things change. And it's amazing when the student's ready how the teacher appears, and a man would disciple me for 10 years. And we would every day go over doctrine and theology and application of the fundamental truths in the Bible and how we were applying those in our life or failing to apply those in our lives. At first I had been resurrected. I'd been called out of the tomb like Lazarus, but I was still wearing grave clothes, right? And he showed me how to take off the grave clothes. And so I went, even in prison, from being a failure to success. There was a lot of things I started doing in prison. I got a degree. I got a bachelor's in psychology. I was going to recovery. I was involved in the church. I started discipling other men, sponsoring other men in recovery. I started giving back. I started realizing that it's not about me. It never has been. It's about how I can help others. I started recognizing the purpose that God equipped me for. And so I dove into that. And then somewhere along the way, a definition of manhood was given to me that I latch onto. And there are 4 aspects of that. A real man will reject passivity, accept responsibility, lead courageously, and expect God's rewards. And when I first heard that, I went, man, I want to dive into that. And that's exactly what I did. The real man rejects passivity. That was what Adam did in the garden. He had walked and talked with God. He knew the heart of God. I believe God had prepared him, and in that moment, when Eve ate and then handed it to him, because he was right there, he was passive. He sat back and he said, let's see how this plays out. He did not step up into the role that God had prepared him for. Our job is not to sit back and wait and see what somebody else will do. We were created for a purpose. We are here this day for a very reason. We have been equipped in a way to make a difference in those around us, whether that's our family, our business, our friend groups, our community, our church. This group right here, you're kings. You're here for a reason. You're here to step into that role. Christ is calling us forth, like Lazarus. Rise up into that role. Shake off the grave clothes. We're also supposed to accept responsibility. If not us, who? If not me, who? If not now, when? Now is the moment. This is the only moment I'm promised. Now is the time to step into that role. A real man leads courageously. He rolls into, I've got a professional mentor who is the COO of a Fortune 20 company. And I love this guy because he breaks it down and makes it so simple. He said, run to the bullet. The obstacle is the way. Lean into that. Lean into it. Do not get passive and back out of it and see if it'll play out on its own. Run to that bullet. Get engaged. That's what men do. God, I need messages like that. And we teach this definition to the guys in prison. And I can't tell you how many 30, 40, 50-year-old men come up to me and say, where were the men at that were supposed to teach me this when I was a kid? I needed that then. I'm like, yeah, me too. But guess what? You know it now. And you can pass it on to those around you or to your kids or your grandkids. That's what we're to do. We're supposed to lead courageously, lead our families, lead our friend groups, lead in our church, lead in our community, and expect God's rewards. It is amazing to me how God will bless you and take you to places you'd never, ever dreamed if you'll just say, send me, Lord, I'll go. You know, eye has not seen nor ear heard, neither have entered into the heart of man the things which God has prepared for those who love him. Look at me. Seriously. Some years ago, I was languishing in prison, trying to hustle together a few guys to put some soups and chilies and chips together to make a spread and eat together and talk about nonsense in prison. And now I'm making $1 million real estate deals and thinking about ways to automate what we're doing in prison and scale. It is amazing the opportunities that God has created because I've been diligent and faithful in small things. I've been invited to the White House twice. Interestingly enough, the Secret Service won't let me in. I actually flew to D.C. one time and stayed at a hotel about a block away from the White House and found out the night before they wouldn't let me in. But I get called all over the country to go speak about things. I've been on the radio. I spoke with a corporation the other day. I spoke to their leadership team just about transformation and rising up. You know, before prison, I couldn't tip a bartender enough to listen to me. It's amazing what God will do. I was on the way to prison, this a year and a half ago to go see the guys and have an event, and a state representative called me and wanted to pick my brain about something. And so I walked into prison and I immediately started telling the guys, you guys won't believe this. But guess what? You too will do this if you continue to follow this path. It's amazing what God will do if we will reject passivity, accept responsibility, lead courageously, and expect God's rewards. He will show up. Ephesians 2:10 said, we are God's workmanship created in Christ Jesus unto good works. The word for workmanship is poema in the Greek, from which we get the word poem. It's sometimes rendered masterpiece. He takes broken pieces and makes masterpieces. He's creating a poem, a love letter in you, in your life, to be read to the world, to tell of the goodness of God. What's that letter reading like right now? Do you need to reject passivity, accept responsibility, lead courageously, expect God's reward, so that that letter has more of a profound impact on your family, your community, your business, your friend groups? God's calling us, brothers. I'm so excited to be standing before kings today because you're difference makers in this community. I don't expect Houston to be different because of you. Why do I think you'll do that? Because that's the only way it's ever worked. Jesus used 12 that were a mishmash, spot of scallywags, just like me. That's how he impacts the world. So I want to call you out today. This is not just to come up here and speak today. I want you to step up. Somebody has come to mind while I was talking today, whether it's your wife, whether it's your kids, whether it's your friends, a coworker, a peer, an employee, somebody at your church. Somebody's come to mind today that you need to step into that. You need to run into that bullet. You need to engage. You need to rise up into that. And I'll tell you what, if you've already taken care of all those, I've got some opportunities for you. There are men right here in this room who have greatly impacted my life. I was a cokehead, a crackhead, a convict. Now I'm CEO because Bert Smith invested in my life, because John Crabb, John Yonkers, John Hunter, Monty Pendleton, many, many others invested into my life, helped me with critical thinking and reasoning, giving me a different vision, showing me how to get there, saying, let's stop and think about that. You need to lean on my expertise and my seasoning here and think about this. Man, we are made for community. We're made by community, for community. And we operate best in community. Every Timothy needs a Paul. Every Paul needs a Timothy. Every Paul needs a Silas, a Barnabas, a John Mark. You need to have a mentor, you need to have a mentee or more, and you need to have your peers that you're walking with. But you should be doing that by rejecting passivity, accepting responsibility, leading courageously, and just wait and see what God will do. Now look, I've challenged you to rise up into some relationships you're thinking about today. But I'll tell you what, I've also put some stuff on the table that tells more about our program and the impact that we've had, the businessmen, the community difference makers that we are building. It's iron sharpening iron. There's a picture of some scallywag right there on the left. That was a picture of me about a year before prison. If you would like to get involved, if you'd like to mentor, if you'd like to be an advisor, if you'd like to be a consultant, we're leading CEO roundtables for our guys. It is amazing to see this super appreciative raw clay on the wheel just waiting for your hand. There's another CEO in prison. There's many more. You want to help make him? You want to help make the guy that comes up and takes my place at the microphone eventually? You can do that. I promise you. You'll be amazed. Of the men in the room who have served and went inside with PEP, would you just raise up your hand? Man. Those are walking epistles of Matthew 25. When did I see you hungry and fed you? When did I see you thirsty and give you something to drink, sick and minister to you? When did I visit you in prison? Hey, I'm going to tell you what, that is the litmus test between the wheat and the tares, the sheep and the goats. That's what Jesus said, not my words, his. That's a great time. It is amazing what happens inside of prison. I'm going to tell you, there are other Bryan Kelleys in prison, and they're waiting on you to step into their lives and help them think through how to become an honorable man, a businessman maybe, or maybe just a community impactor, because we've taken somebody who's been in a perpetual cycle of crime and poverty, and we are going to make them a real producer. We're taking gang leaders into servant leaders. We're taking felons and turning them into real fathers, even philanthropists. Hey, it takes, I share this with the guys all the time, you can no more give what you haven't got than you can be from where you've never been. You guys have the tools to give. They want them. Are we just going to sit back passively and let them continue to live in want to get out of our prisons and stand on the street corner and says, hey, anything helps? Guess what? Anything doesn't help. You help. You guys made the difference in my life. And there are hundreds, thousands more. I dare you. You know how much I love dares. I dare you to step into that. It will be one of the most impactful things ever in your life. It's an honor to be here standing before kings. I love you guys. God bless you. Love you, brother.
Wow. Before Bryan goes anywhere, I'm going to give you a chance for a few questions, but a couple things I want you to know before we move on to questions. Number one, you guys will get a follow-up email later today, and Bryan, we'll put a link to the different opportunities you have here in that email. So that one of the sort of the values of Toolbox is the developmental importance of next steps. So we don't want you to be all spun up today without anywhere to go. So be looking for that and chances to connect into that. All right. Second is that definition of manhood: reject passivity, accept responsibility, lead courageously, and work for the greater reward, God's reward. I think it comes originally from a study called The Quest for Authentic Manhood. So in that follow-up email, there will also be a link today where you can get engaged in a study like that to begin to pursue this, to flesh that out in your lives. If you're sitting there going, yeah, I need that. Okay? So, thank you. How about a few questions for Bryan before we get right here, Don.
So, when you get to prison, you're an adult, basically, but the youth and the detention centers, does PEP have some kind of program for the ones that are kind of in the youth detention centers that haven't gotten to the big prisons?
We do not yet. We're adult and men only right now. And I think we're looking at something I'm super excited about. We're looking at building a second chance incubator accelerator here on the East End. I'm currently looking at leases right now, and we want to build the preeminent second chance incubator accelerator. And I think once we work through some of our automation phase that we have right now, we're going to be able to open this up a little bit wider. I'm going to tell you, I think the youth, especially the at-risk youth, gravitate to this. I've taken our guys to halfway houses for youth offenders, and it is absolutely magical what happens because our guys are credible messengers. The kids instantly listen to them, and so they have a huge impact, and I think they can be catalysts in transformation of those young lives. And I'll tell you, I went to the halfway house myself one day to just kind of get the lay of the land and see if it's something we could do. And as I walked in, very secure environment, went through a couple of doors, about 25 kids looked up at me, seeing who's invading their space, and they looked at me and they go, oh great, another old white dude from church. And I saw that, right? And so I just sat down, just acclimated with them, didn't really say anything. And at dinner, they asked me to give a short testimony, and I told the kids, I said, hey, I know what it's like to be you. And they went, yeah, whatever. And I said, no, really, I just got out of prison. And then they looked at me like, wait, what? And I said, matter of fact, how many of you guys are 22 years old? And they said, none of us, we're 16 to 18. And I said, I did more time in prison than you've been alive. There's nothing you can tell me about prison I don't know. And then, oh my gosh, I got mobbed. And the number one question they asked me, and this goes exactly what we're talking about today, the number one question those kids asked me was, my dad's in prison, do you know him? And I went, wow. So do we do that now? No. Is there a need? Absolutely. Is that fertile ground? Unquestionably. And I think we need to work that out. And I think we're moving in a direction that can get us there. So we're actively trying to automate and then scale right now. And we'd love to get to that place. And we need thinkers like you to help us do that. Yes, sir.
Hey, Bryan, Jim Kim. Pleasure to meet you today. My question is exactly in regards to the topic you spoke about today, masculinity. So what I've noticed over the past few years is that the mainstream media doesn't like men being masculine to a certain just the other day we had International Women's Day, which I think is a great thing, but when are we going to have an International Men's Day? Aside from that, my question is, so what can we do? What are your thoughts about the mainstream media attacking manhood and masculinity at times? I know a lot of people in here see the same thing. And also, how can we combat that and be more masculine and manly instead of cowering down to what they're trying to do?
Great question. And there are so many things with the mainstream media I've got issue with right now. We don't have all day. I could dive into that. But I think, the best thing we can do is model that, because when we model that, everybody around us loves that. The women, the men. I've had men around me my entire life, and the real men who are life-giving spirits, and I didn't bring that up today. If I wanted to sum up my whole talk today, it's 1 Corinthians 15:45. And that's the first Adam became a living being. The second Adam, Christ, became a life-giving spirit. That's our model. That's what we're supposed to be when we reject passivity, accept responsibility, lead courageously. We become life-giving spirits. Everybody wants that. I don't care what the media says. If we become a life-giving spirit, everybody's drawn to it. So that's all we've got to do. Yes, sir.
Bryan, thank you so much for a wonderful message. Looks like we share the same hairstylist.
That's where God kissed us.
I'm sure everyone in this room wishes we could have some redos. Maybe you can talk to us about the process of seeking forgiveness when you were 16 years old. Your girlfriend got pregnant, and can you share that a little bit with us on how you worked through that and maybe even reached out later on to your girlfriend? Thank you again.
Wow, forgiveness is so huge, not just for me, probably everybody, but especially the guys in prison. And working through forgiveness for me was one of the major hurdles, and the biggest one was forgiving self, right? I couldn't forgive me. That was the reason when Keith asked me to hand it over to God, I knew what I deserved. It was prison or worse. I knew that. And it was super hard for me to forgive self and realize that, some things happened in my life. They didn't cause me to commit murder, but they also shaped who I became. And I had to forgive those people too. I had to forgive my father. Interestingly, I reached out to him a few years ago on Father's Day. I found him on Facebook and reached out and said, hey, I'd like to get to know you. If you're willing, I'm open. And if not, God bless you. Because I had forgiven him. I'd worked through that. He was doing the best he could with what he had, and he was, he did not do well. But I get that because I've not done well many times too. And so why am I expecting more out of people than I can deliver myself, right? There was a young man in prison I went to, and he couldn't forgive his father, who drove him and beat him down. And so the son became a really good baseball player, went to college playing baseball because his dad loves baseball, and he was desperately trying to get his affirmation. And so he had one of the best games he'd ever played in college baseball. His dad was in attendance, and so he went up to him afterwards. He said, so what'd you think? And all his dad did was critique the things he did well, and he quit. He quit that day. And when I spoke to him that day, he was cussing mad. And he said, there's no way I can ever forgive that blankety blank. And I'm like, well, you need to go talk to him about that. And he goes, he's dead. I'll never forgive him. And I said, well, the only person that you're hurting now is you. You're drinking poison trying to hurt him. And so, God, forgiveness is huge for the guys in prison. For I think all of us. People hurt us. Hurting people hurt people. But guess what? Healing people heal people. If you've been healed by God, you become a healer yourself. Yes, sir.
So we all have stories. We all have a red wagon that we bring behind
Amen.
us. As the gentleman referenced earlier, for those that had that powerful, powerful testimony that are not quite ready to share to that vulnerability, which increases that trust, what words of wisdom would you give the king in here who's got that red wagon of power to let that pride go and begin the dialogue to increase the trust?
It is amazing to me what transparency will do. when you lead by sharing your vulnerability, it opens up and it makes a safe environment for them to share too. I've led a bunch of testimony workshops inside of prison. Matter of fact, I even took the Baylor's Big 12 Championship women's volleyball team in with us one time because they heard about this, and we had a testimony workshop, and the ladies sat down with the men. They were blown away. And it's amazing what happens when these successful athletes come in and talk about their brokenness too, and the guys just crumble and they share what's going on. So we can, to impact people, to get behind the walls, to dive into the core issues, it's always lead with transparency. It works every single time. Yes, sir.
Thanks, Bryan. I was curious which prisons are you in today? What growth plans does your organization have for the future?
Fantastic. So we're currently operating in 2 units, one near Houston, it's up here in Cleveland, and then one just south of Dallas at the Estes unit. We graduate about 400 guys each year. We're looking at ways to automate that and maybe 2x that each year, because we're not going to have as much access to prison as we had before. We used to be really hands-on, and it takes that, and we're not going to do away with that. We're just going to push some of that to the outside, and so we can have more go through the pipeline. But there's a lot of opportunities to serve, and I'll tell you just some of the results, which are remarkable. We've had over 500 businesses started by our graduates. We had a pitch event at the Dallas Bush Center on SMU campus year and a half ago. 250 impact investors in the room. Several had put some money in the kitty. We had $250,000 available for our contestants. We really showcased the men. It was amazing. The winner that night was a guy who got out of prison about 8 or 9 years ago. No real skills, but he went through PEP and he worked on character and he learned a lot from the men in this room. And so he went to West Texas to work in the oil fields and make some money as a laborer. That's really only skills he had. Well, he went out there and he was working with his boss one day and the truck broke down. And his boss said, "Will you see if you can fix the truck?" And he said, "I am so not a mechanic." He said, "Well, at least try or we're stuck here." So he went over and he fixed the truck. And his boss said, "Wow, you've got some mechanical reasoning skills. I'm going to send you to get some training. Is that okay?" He said, "Yeah, please." So he started doing some training sessions. They moved him into the shop. He moved up to shop foreman because of his work ethic, because of the character that had been implanted from PEP. And then the entrepreneur came out in him, and he started recognizing gaps of things going on in the oil field. And so he stopped and he started his own business of doing preventative maintenance on the treater trucks that goes out to the oil wells. And with just good customer service, no marketing whatsoever, he did $1.9 million his first year with 300 net. He wanted to get a shop and some more trucks, and he won $100,000 that night. And he came up to me afterwards. It was amazing. He goes, "Hey, have you ever heard of a school called Stanford?" I said, "Yes, I have." "Why, what's up?" He said, "There's a professor over there that wants me to come out and go through a Hispanic entrepreneurship program and come speak to his class." I said, "Go." This goes back to, it's amazing how God's rewards will show up for those who are diligent and faithful in small things.
You had a life sentence. How did God set you free in 20 years?
Yeah, it's amazing. There's 2 different times of life sentences, basically. There's life with parole and life without parole. I had life with parole, which is the only one that was available at that time. And it was an interesting quirk on mine. I became parole eligible pretty quickly. In 6 years, on a life sentence for murder, I became parole eligible. But I started a series of denials. We call them set-offs. Matter of fact, I was denied 12 times. And when it devastated my mom every time. I'm her only child in prison. She takes responsibility and the guilt for that. But at my 13th time up for parole, I was out west of San Antonio, and I got to meet a voting member. And he was basically telling me I made parole. He was telling me what it was going to be like when I got out. And I'm going, wow, I'm getting out. And so at the end, he said, "Any questions?" I said, "Yeah, sir, I've got one." He said, "What is it?" And I said, "Will you give me parole next year?" He said, "Excuse me, are you asking me to stay in prison for another year? Having done 20? Boom. "Yes, sir." And he said, "Why? Why would you do that?" and I said, I want to go through the prison entrepreneurship program and develop a business plan that I've got. But what I didn't tell him, what the real truth of the matter was, is I had been introduced to PEP before, and I knew what I was getting. I knew I was getting access to all these men in the room. I knew I was getting a network of difference makers who would care about me and help me that you don't get when you're coming out of graduate school. It was an investment in my future to do another year in prison and go through PEP, and I did that willingly, and I've never, ever regretted that decision. It's why I'm here today. Yes, sir. One more.
Thank you, Bryan. This goes, I want an advice, but goes outside of mentoring, more from your personal experience. What advice would you give somebody who feels stalled, boxed, who is seeing everything out there, all the opportunities, but feels that he's really boxed and can't go past his mindset or something? What advice from your personal experience of being in prison, pretty much?
You know, that's a great advice. A lot of our guys in prison are creative and they've got great skills, and they're certainly willing and appreciative, and they don't know where to go. They don't know how their skills fits in the working world. They haven't been, they've usually been drug dealers or something, and so they don't even know what opportunities there are out there. So we tell them is start doing what you can now, right? And show your worth there, learn something, you can always jump to the next thing. 2 nights ago, I took some of our guys in Dallas out to get a slab of cow, feed them a steak, and just talk to them. One guy has been out a year and a half. His first job was at Benihana. He learned how to be a hibachi chef. He was awesome. And he's got a great personality. He's a huge, hulking guy, right? And so he learned how to do that, and then he switched over to selling phone service. And he was great at that, and they moved him quickly up to in management, and now he's trying to get into real estate. And everything he does, he's learned, I can learn this, and I can use this, and it's an arrow in my quiver. And so who knows what's coming for him, right? But he's taking this and doing things really well because he's being faithful in whatever God puts before him. And so, you know, sometimes you don't have to figure out what you want to be at the pinnacle. You've just got to start going up the path, up the mountain. You know what I mean? Matter of fact, I asked him, great looking guy, handsome, buff, looks like a bodybuilder, he's doing well, out a year and a half. I said, hey, you got a girlfriend? And he said, nope. And I'm like, how do you not have a girlfriend? He goes, Bryan, I don't want a girlfriend. I want a wife. He said, right now, I don't feel like I can support and nurture and care for and provide for a wife. I don't want a girlfriend. I want a wife. Until I'm ready to get a wife, I'm working on me. And I'm like, golly, great answers. You got to work on the small things before you get to the big things.
How about another big hand?
Yeah.
So just one other thing is to know that if you have an organization or a group, a company, church, somebody that might love to hear from Bryan, I'm sure he'd love to talk to you about it. He's got a story to tell. I think Hope and Traction, you think? I'm telling you. In spades here today, so thank you so much, Bryan. And I'm going to invite Dwight Edwards to come close us down now, but be looking for a follow-up email in order to take some of the next steps that have been mentioned here today. So, and thank you again for being here.
That was awesome. I really appreciate it. Wow, this is why we do what we do. And let me just pray for us, and then we'll be gone. You know, one of the central passions of Toolbox, and what we've just heard as well, is that every man in this room is created to be a game changer. No exemption. And as long as you're still drawing breath, God still has a plan for you. If he was done with you, you wouldn't be here. But most often it comes down to just the next step. Not the next 3 steps, not the next 4 steps. What's the next step that God has? And you know, we want to help you with that. We've got different kinds of Bible studies that moves this from being a once-a-month event to weekly. We have Bible studies that are just at the very beginning, or you're just kicking the tires of Christianity and not even sure what the whole thing's about. Just a discussion-oriented, very non-threatening, be a great place to start. Some of you further, and you need a weekly Bible study where you're getting in the scriptures, maybe for the first time in a significant way. And then we even have a pretty advanced disciple-making 2-year program if you would like to join in. But if you contact either myself or Tom, we would love to help you find that next step for you. And it may be that you're here and the next step for you is the first step. And that's the step that we all have to take and are invited to take in saying, Lord Jesus, I realize that I'm a sinner. I realize that I haven't been the man that I was created to be, that I should have been, that I could have been. I've sinned. And yet I understand that you died on the cross 2,000 years ago for my sins, for all my sins. And so the opportunity this afternoon is that you can know that you're on your way to a place called heaven. Nobody's ready to live life in time until eternity is squared away. And if you're not 100% sure that you're on your way to this place called heaven, but you'd like to be, I want to invite you just to pray this prayer along with me, in which you indicate that you're only trusting in Christ's death to get you to that place. Lord Jesus, I realize that I've not been the man I could have been or should have been. But thank you for dying for every one of my sins. And right here, Houston Country Club, I just want to tell you I'm in. I'm trusting only your death to get me to heaven. I'm inviting you to come and live inside me and change me, because I can't change myself. I need your help. Lord Jesus, thank you. Amen. See everybody next month.